And now, prepare your ear holes for penetration as we bring you another great podcast from the Poop Culture Extended Universe.
Warning, the following program features content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to the Beaucephus Broadcast.
Greetings, boys and girls, and welcome to episode 48 of the Beaucephus Broadcast. Glad to be back in the basement with you for another week of shenanigans across the World Wide Web. You have officially got under a week to finish your Christmas shopping. It's down to the wire, and if you're anything like me, or like I used to be, you're going to be doing a lot of this on Christmas Eve or the day before that on the 23rd. But I think, surprisingly enough, I'm done. I hope I'm done. I think I ordered enough stuff. But yeah, I think I'm done. I think we're covered for this year. I'm looking forward to it either way because I've got some scheduled days off. So I'll have a nice 5-day weekend that kind of culminates or centers around Christmas this year. So it'll be good to unwind, spend some time with the family, see some friends, just kind of get back to the basics, just like Waylon and Willie did. We did, to get a little more in the Christmas spirit last night, we ate dinner in Keokuk at the Hawkeye, which is, it's good stuff. It's good eating. And then we drove through the City of Christmas, the big famed Christmas light display that runs throughout Rand Park up in Keokuk, Iowa. It's pretty amazing that this is going to be, the 30th year next year, somewhere around there. This thing has been around forever. Pretty amazing that Keokuk can keep this going. And then Quincy's like, we can't do Avenue of Lights anymore. We're just going to give these back to the businesses. So, it is what it is. So a big tip of the cap to the City of Christmas folks up in Keokuk, Iowa, which I think it gets better and better every year. I'll post a little video on the Facebook page of driving through the lighted tunnel. The weird thing about it, there was a car behind us, and I'm sure this is a tourist destination for a lot of people throughout this time of year, people that are in town to visit family for the holidays, and they maybe have never experienced it before, but there's a lot of photography that goes on from tourists that go through this thing, and we were, I guess, unfortunate, I would call it, to be in front of one of these folks last night. It's fine, take all the pictures you want, but the thing that irked me is they were using flash. They were using flash to take photos of Christmas lights, not like the actual scenery that may have had, like a small, floodlight shining out. They were taking pictures of the Christmas lights with the flash on. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't exactly know, but wouldn't you get better photos of Christmas lights without the flash? I really don't know, but the flash was definitely distracting because it was, blown out. I'm pretty sure that it was the camera where you put the hood over your head, and pretty sure that's the type of camera that they were taking photos with. Super distracting when you don't have your headlights on, when nobody in the whole pack has their headlights on. So, I don't know. It kind of took me out of the element. Either way, nice little getaway for the evening. We enjoyed it. And then we came home and we wallowed in food misery. We started watching Trailer Park Boys, which that was about 3 hours of me laughing, probably harder than anything I've laughed at on television in the past few months, maybe a year. I don't know. I finally get it, though. I understand why people are crazy about this show, because it's great. And there's many more seasons that we have to get through. But mission has been started. Looking forward to finishing it. Of course, we couldn't watch this without the internet, and this past week was huge for the whole net neutrality thing. Listen, if the internet goes down the tubes, I've already got a contingency plan in place. You've probably seen this. The show, in the event that the internet disappears, we no longer have it, or people aren't subscribing to it anymore because it's too expensive, we have you covered. I've thought this out. The show is going to become available via a monthly pamphlet that's going to be available on newsstands, unfortunately, only throughout the tri-state area. I know we've got a lot of national listeners. We've got some global listeners. We've got some in England. We've got some in Canada. We've got some in Australia. Unfortunately, as of right now, the show will no longer be available to those folks if the internet, does go by the wayside. But I've been talking with our development and marketing departments to see about possibly getting a subscription service started, kind of like the old Columbia House. We send you something on some cheaply made paper. You return cash or check in the mail, your mailing address, because that's how mail works, and we send you that every month. So it's a possibility. We're looking into that. Otherwise, most of you in the Northeast Missouri, Southeast Iowa, and West Central Illinois area should be it should be right next to the Nemo Trader at your local smoke shop So you can look for it there. And again, this is all contingent on whether the internet, kind of folds or not. Now, eventually, I'd like to start including an audio version of the show in that pamphlet. We'll see. We'll see what the budget allows. But I'm talking about like a CD included in every month. Maybe a flash drive would be more appropriate, more accessible for a lot of you. I don't know. There's a lot of things to consider as far as the future of this podcast is concerned in the wake of net neutrality. So I welcome your feedback. If the internet dies, how do you want to continue receiving this show? Drop a line to Facebook, shoot a tweet to @BeauBcraft, or you can email Beaucephusbroadcast@gmail.com. Now, the potential upside of the internet going by the wayside is that you'll officially have far less passwords to remember. But if it does stick around, I've got a little something for you that's going to help you manage all those passwords. Now, if you're like me, you've got countless passwords and you can barely keep track of them all as it is. Well, let me introduce you to Vault. That's VALT. Vault is the visualized approach to passwords. Now, with Vault, you get the security of locking your data behind this truly random password. It's a master password. So you don't have the hassle of having to memorize one. You get one for all of them. So you can store, you can manage, you can generate, you can retrieve all your passwords across all platforms, all devices. This is the exact thing that myself, and I'm sure a lot of others, have been looking for to better manage all the passwords that we have. Well, it's here. And you can get it for free for 2 whole months just for being a listener of the show. All you have to do is visit Vault, that's VALT.io/Beau. That's BEAU, vault.io/Beau. Download it now. 2 months on me. It is my Christmas gift to you. And that's a great idea for a Christmas present for anyone. Because we've all got passwords. We all hate manage them, right? So make your passwords painless with Vault. Speaking of painless, it wasn't painless, but there were a lot of steps involved in this. But I was finally able to snag that part-time retail job, folks. Yes, it finally happened. I'm very excited about it, too. Starting Monday, December 18th, which is tomorrow, or I guess for a lot of you is today, I am headed down to work in the stockroom of Sears. Thank you. This is a very exciting opportunity. Steady extra income, flexible schedule, and in due time, I'll be able to sell you appliances. So if you're going to be, in the market for a new microwave or perhaps a side-by-side refrigerator freezer combo with an ice maker in the side, I'm your guy. You know where to turn now. I can get you that. Like I said, a lot of steps involved with applying for that part-time job. At least there were with Sears. And that's fine. They run you through the ringer, but I would rather be run through the ringer and know that they're not just going to let anybody walk in there and work, Like I could be working with, the next Jeff Dahmer or something like that. I don't know. I'm glad they take the extra steps to make sure that everybody there is up to snuff, you know what I mean? But yeah, a lot of steps involved. And I even had to take a P test this week. And I haven't had to do that since high school football, I think. But I passed it with flying colors. I had no doubt that I was going to. But here's the thing, though. And you can tell me if I'm alone in feeling this way. What is it about taking a drug screening that gives you, tremendous anxiety? I felt the entire time leading up to this that I was going to fail this drug test. And this is coming from a guy who lives a fairly clean lifestyle. I don't do any drugs. Very rarely do I drink. So there's no reason that I'd pop this thing outside of having, a poppy seed muffin or something like that. Which I don't know if is that a myth or is that real? I don't know. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, the anxiety and the fear that I was going through was 100% there leading up to this drug test. So here's how it goes down. I got to go to a local walk-in clinic to do this, all right? It takes me about 20 minutes to fill out the paperwork, of course, because it's my first time there, and I'm sure the next time, if I ever have to go back, it'll take me another 30 minutes to fill out new paperwork. So anyway, I get back there. After filling out all this paperwork, there's this lady standing there. And I'm thinking the whole time, man, I have to pee really bad, because I've been holding this on purpose since I left for lunch. I drank a lot of water that morning, more so than usual. So I really got to pee. So then I start thinking, while I'm standing there talking to her, I'm she's not going to, stand behind me and watch me do this, is she? She's not going to stand there and watch me pee. Because I won't pee then. I will not pee if somebody is standing there watching me, let alone a woman. And that's not a sexist thing. That's just that's a comfort thing for me. I don't want a guy watching me pee. Anyway, beside the point, she didn't. I got to go in a closed little room. There's a closet and there's a toilet. And she says, okay, 2 things. empty all your pockets, put your coat and all the stuff that you take out of your pockets in this locker, and I'm going to lock it. Second thing, the toilet will not flush. And I get that. That's fine. That makes sense, right? I'll make sure nothing's been tampered with in there. So I do all that stuff, walk in there, shut the door, lock it, and I go to lift the toilet seat up because that's what you're taught to do from an early age as a boy when you go pee. So I go to lift the toilet seat up. It won't go up. Like it's fixed in this position, and it makes the loudest sound possible while I'm trying to be courteous and lift this thing. Like to the point I'm like, oh, did I break this? Has this been broken? And I'm almost certain, almost positive that I heard her laugh out there while I'm doing this. And I can't be the only one who's done this. I can't be the only one who has tried to lift this in the time that she's been there. So she's probably heard multiple people try to do the same thing. Either that or they only drug test women there. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I should have sat down to pee, but that's not my nature. That's not the first thing I think about when I gotta go pee. Anyway, so I leave the toilet seat down, going against, like I said, everything that I'd ever been taught growing up. Like I said, she also said the toilet's not gonna flush. It's evidently, it's rigged that way as well, but that makes sense. That I can handle. But, guys, you know how unpredictable the stream can be, right? So there's even more paranoia added to this now because now there's an obstacle involved. There's a challenge to not get pee all over the seat. And I don't recall seeing any toilet paper or paper towels in there that would have allowed me to clean up any excess stream that may have dribbled onto said seat because it wouldn't lift. So you don't want to pee all over the seat because these people, they've got your name, they have your address, they have your phone number, they have your social security number, they have your point of contact in case of emergency. These people could drag your name through the mud. They could ruin your life. You pee on their toilet seat, you make a fool out of yourself by leaving a golden mess for them to clean up, they could send the mob out for you. So not only you got the paranoia that you're gonna fail this drug test, which you're not gonna fail, but you got the paranoia that you're gonna pee all over this seat and these people are gonna be mad at you. So anyway, she gives me specific directions as to how much pee I needed, or I guess she phrased it was how much she needed, which was also kind of bizarre, but I get it. I understand that. So anyway, I'm very careful in making sure I know exactly where to top this thing off. And I did it. I hit the midway point between the bare minimum and the absolute maximum. Pretty proud of myself for being able to be so precise with that. But I've got to pinch it off, right? I've got to stop midstream because I've still got a lot of peeing left to do. And I know I can't raise the seat. And I just know with my luck that if I don't and I try to finish off, it's going to be one of those wildfire peas that takes no prisoners in its path. So I'm thinking, all right, I'll give her the pee. Out the door I go. I'll finish up when I get back to work. Wrong. There's more paperwork. There's more signatures that have to be offered up and everything in between. So I'm standing there looking like, Pee Wee Herman on the bar. Well, she's small talking about having to test hair samples and giving me the legal jargon that boils down to essentially saying this is my pee and it's not somebody else's, I promise, blah, blah, blah. So we finally wrap it up and I haul it back to work and I take a pee that felt like a Calgon commercial looks. Magnificent. So here we are today. A lot of people that know about this whole endeavor have asked me, so on top of a weekly trivia night, a monthly music trivia night, being in a band, playing on your own, doing a podcast, having a full-time job, you're going to add another part-time job to your plate? The answer is yes. Look, it would be a lot easier for me to find a better-paying full-time job, but in truth, they're few and far between in this area, at least as it pertains to something that I'd like to do or that I could see myself doing for a prolonged period of time as a career. You know what I mean? So yes, it would be easier to get a better full-time job, but at this point, it doesn't exist. And I've never been the type of person that wants to complain to everybody about the lack of money I have. I'd rather just go get the extra money. I'd rather go punch the clock, bust your butt, earn the extra money, and then you're good. You don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So I'll go back to work part-time. It's not unheard of. Certainly not uncommon. There are people that work more jobs than I do. Look, my theory for a long time, for like the past 5 years or so, is that if I work hard now while I'm moderately young, while I'm 29, 30 years old, I'll be able to relax a lot more down the line. Plus, right now, I have more student loan debt than I make as an annual salary, which is completely mismatched, if you ask me. So the extra money won't hurt anything. Look, I'd like to have that paid off by the time that I introduce children into the world, and I'm getting to that point, or that biological clock is ticking. So I'd like to be able to pay for those kids to go through school and not come out covered in debt like their dad did. In summation, I listened to a lot of Dave Ramsey.
Man, that's cool. That's cool. He does such a great job. It's amazing.
That's probably the subliminal motivation behind all of this. Anyway, that is enough about me. We're going to move on because we have another great guest for you this week. I reached out to this guy earlier this year when I first heard about this story and his book. And growing up in Memphis, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of Hannibal, I had never heard about this story. There were several stories around this area that I'd never heard of until I moved to Quincy about 3 to 5 years ago. So there's a lot of cool local history stuff around here, and this story is one of them. So we had a lot of correspondence back and forth over the following months, and it's finally happened. I finally got him on the program. His name is John Wingate, and he's an author that was born and raised partly just down the road from the Beaucephus Broadcast headquarters in Hannibal, Missouri. John has released a new book titled Lost Boys of Hannibal, which is a very, very fascinating tale. It's the story of 3 boys who in 1967 went missing in the caves of Hannibal. And if you have been in the caves down in Hannibal, you know what an intricate, complex cave system this entire thing is. So to get lost in there is it's not a far-fetched concept. Like, it could happen. And especially, this was before all the development so that it was tourist-friendly. So you can imagine, this is totally feasible. It's also kind of terrifying to think about, it could have been me, it could have been my kids. So in turn of these 3 boys going missing in this cave, it spawned the largest cave search in United States history, and today remains a mystery unsolved. And there's a lot of cool stuff about this story, so stick around. We're going to learn all about it coming up next. That includes a very interesting tidbit about infamous serial killer John Wayne Gacy and his potential connection to this as well. It's my chat with author John Wingate, up next on the Beaucephus Broadcast.
The Beaucephus Broadcast.
Ever get frustrated trying to remember what password belongs to what account? You're preaching to the choir. Luckily, there's an app for that. Vault. That's V-A-L-T. It's the visual approach to passwords. With Vault, you can easily store, manage, generate, and retrieve all your passwords across all your devices. Never waste another minute trying to remember a password. Right now, you can visit vault.io/Beau and receive 2 free months of synchronization just for being a listener of the Beaucephus Broadcast. That's VALT.io/BEAU. Vault, making passwords painless.
We now return to the Beaucephus Broadcast.
My guest today is the author of a new book titled Lost Boys of Hannibal, which chronicles the real-life disappearance of 3 young boys from Hannibal, Missouri in 1967, which spawned the largest cave search in United States history. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Mr. John Wingate. Great to finally speak with you. Glad to have you here.
Beau, it's good to be here.
I have unfortunately not been able to read the book yet, but this is a story that is already well established. It's almost like an urban legend, but it's not. This actually happened. So tell me what your connection is to this story and what inspired you to write this new book.
Well, I spent my childhood in Hannibal, Missouri, in what's a historic town. Mark Twain lived there for part of his early adulthood and childhood. And tourism is a big industry in Hannibal, so tourists flock to Hannibal every year to take advantage of Mark Twain Cave and the Mark Twain Museum and such. So all these literary icons, are there. And the 3 boys were pretty much cut from the same cloth as Twain's character, Tom Sawyer. They were adventurous and full of life. And the disappearance of Joel Hogue, who was 13, and Billy Hogue, his brother, who was 11, and their friend Edwin Craig Dowell, who was 14, really represents the ultimate unsolved mystery. The trio vanished near a complex underground cave network that had recently been exposed by State Highway 79 road construction on the south side of Hannibal. The boys had been exploring these newly identified caves in previous days and had been sternly warned away by the construction workers and their concerned parents. Now, the trio of boys had also explored Murphy's Cave, which is 3 blocks north of the road construction site. And Murphy's Cave was first discovered in 1872, and both caves were the focus of this intensive race against time search in May of 1967. Now, my connection is I was 13 years old, and I spent my early childhood in Hannibal and went to school with the Hogue boys. Joel was a good friend of mine and was in several of my classes, and he was a great kid, full of spirit. So when this terrible tragedy happened, it really hit me hard, as it did everyone else, of course.
So you mentioned that you were classmates with one of these kids, and that the cave construction, as they were kind of developing this cave system, that was going on at the time. Did you yourself ever, do any exploration?
Well, I did. Growing up in Hannibal, it was a great childhood, a lot like the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. It was predates the era of the iPods and iPads and 800 cable channels. We had no digital distractions, so we were outdoors all the time and exploring the hills and bluffs of northeast Missouri that were literally a stone's throw from our houses on the south side. So we'd explore the hills and find, crinoid fossils in the Burlington limestone and come home with snakes. And I remember Joel in fourth grade came across, the Hogue family lived right across the street from our elementary school. And after school was out, he goes, "Hold on a second, I'll be right back." So he runs across to his house, and a few minutes later comes back with this 6 or 7 foot long black snake draped across his shoulders, and one hand outstretched with the head, the other hand outstretched with the tail. And he said, "Look what I found on my uncle's farm." And the girls, shrank away in horror, and the boys all moved in closer for a better look. So that was Joey Hogue. He was something.
So it sounds to me like he was, your typical ornery young kid that, would like to not necessarily get into mischief, but was an explorer, as I think a lot of kids predating like you said, the existence of the kind of technology that we have today. So I'm assuming that him exploring the cave and his friend and his brother going with him was probably not out of the ordinary. This had probably happened numerous times before, no?
Right. I mean, the road construction site was literally a block and a half from their homes, and when those caves were exposed during the highway construction, I'm confident it would have been impossible to keep Joey away from those. And they had jumped into the caves on the 2 previous evenings and were just likely flabbergasted by what they saw underground in their hometown, this labyrinth of passageways extending for a mile, a crisscross network that was so complex that it really caused the cavers trouble during the search. But the boys found passageways that were up to 12 feet high in spots, and others were coffin snug and had to be squirmed through. They cut their first visit short, climbed out, and were run off by the construction foreman who said, "Go on, get home. You could get hurt here." And the parents warned them to stay away from the caves, but boys will be boys, and they were back. And the last time they were ever seen was May 10th, 1967, about 5:15 in the early evening, standing up on the high hill, the side of the road cut where the construction was happening, looking down on all the activity. And then as the dust cleared, they were gone.
So when did the news break that these boys had disappeared? When they didn't show up for school the next morning, or how did this all play out?
Well, they were reported missing fairly quickly. All 3 boys were part of a youth group at church, and their meeting was that evening at 7. So they should have been home by 5 o'clock or so for dinner, and then the bus would take them to church. When they didn't show up, siblings went out and started looking for them, and by 6:30 in the evening, Mrs. Hogue had called the police, and officers were dispatched to Murphy's Cave, where some kids had seen them about 4:30. The officers went in with their uniforms and patent leather shoes, and kind of like they were entering an alien world, and calling out their names, and no answer. And by later that evening, the Mark Twain Emergency Squad was on the scene, but the squad had been established in 1962 and had much experience pulling bodies out of the river and finding lost hunters and helping respond to auto accidents, but they really had very little caving experience, so they had no equipment appropriate for that either. So by 9 or 10 that evening, some cavers from a group in Quincy were called down, and they really started looking in depth as well inside Murphy's Cave. And then the search started overnight, and by Thursday morning, the call had gone out to cavers throughout Missouri. And Missouri has some very good cavers because it's the cave state with 7,300 caves and counting. So by Thursday morning, afternoon, we were getting some really good cavers at Hannibal. And the man who kind of led the charge was Bill Karras, a Virginia-based caver and a cave rescue specialist. And the previous fall, in 1966, he had established the Speleological Society of America, and he wanted to bring a greater focus to the need for cave search and rescue services. And Karras had a very strong personality, and he kind of enjoyed the media limelight, so he kind of rubbed many of the cavers at Hannibal the wrong way because a lot of cavers prefer to shun the carnival atmosphere and focus more on the urgent mission.
You mentioned that he was all the way from Virginia. Obviously, this is, again, we keep going back to this being the age well before social media. So how quickly and how far did this story spread back then?
Well, it garnered worldwide coverage eventually. It started out with, the local station and radio station, and then broadened out to the Quincy media that was on top of it from the earliest hours as well. And then the wire services, AP and United Press International, staffed it, and there were dispatches daily from the scene, and I have news clippings from, Portland and Seattle and Philadelphia, and, coverage from Vietnam, Europe, Australia. So this was big news because of the Mark Twain theme, modern-day Tom Sawyers. It was a great kind of literary hook. From a news perspective, and so they all came to Hannibal and watched and waited. And I can remember as a 13-year-old boy standing there with my dad alongside the road cut watching the action, and a young CBS correspondent named Ed Bradley was there doing his report. And I remember watching him do his stand-up, and he closed by saying, "But at this hour, there's no good news here in Hannibal, Missouri." Ed Bradley, CBS News.
Wow.
And, he was probably 25 at the time, and of course he's dead now. But that career path kind of captured my interest there, watching that drama and seeing how the news people interacted. So I later became a journalist and was in television news for 20 years, and it all kind of goes back to the genesis of that event.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very interesting how that's all kind of come full circle, how it piqued your interest in journalism, and then here you are present day writing a book about, that particular experience. What were some of the reactions to the disappearance of these three boys? Especially, I'd like to hear your reaction to, as a friend of these boys and being, their age. What was your reaction? What was the reaction of a lot of the adults in the community, or just in general, how everybody was feeling about this event unfolding?
Well, it was really a shock. My family had moved to Quincy, 17 miles up the Mississippi from Hannibal, in summer of '64. And so I was 13 at the time, and I remember picking up the Quincy Herald-Whig the afternoon of May 11th, and the headline said, "3 boys still missing in caves." And I thought, what on earth? And I read on, and Joey Hogue, are you kidding me? And it was just stunning. Kids aren't supposed to lose their friends that young. Life was still new and spreading out before us. So my parents and I were hovering over the newspaper, and then we caught the news later, and it was traumatic. And I remember trying to focus on my homework and this intruding, and I sat down to watch My Three Sons on Channel 7, one of the 2 local TV stations. And I thought, good hell, my 3 sons, 3 boys, I can't catch a break, right? So it's like, everything was bringing me back to that news story. So, and I, as a 13-year-old boy, you don't share your emotions, so I kept it bottled up pretty good. It's kind of our boyish DNA not to share like that. But when I went to bed laying in the dark, the tears came, and it was just, I remember praying, dear God, please let them find the boys. And it was like this throughout in every household. The Hogue family had 11 children, and they were just well known just by virtue of the fact there are so many family members. Everybody in town knew one of them. And the parents ran Hogue Tavern, which was a family-friendly eatery that was noted for their Mexican food and their pies and their meatloaf. And so the kids were kind of on their own and helped take care of each other for long periods when the folks were down at the tavern. But it was very traumatic, and the Dow family was a single mom in the household, and it was tough, and there was a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, and everybody did all they could. Ladies in the neighborhood were making food and lemonade and iced tea to take over to the Southside Christian Church that kind of became the nerve center, just by virtue of the fact that it sat right there by the road cut, and it was convenient. So everybody chipped in and did what they could, and at the peak, there were over 200 people involved in this, maybe 200 to 300, including 150 National Guardsmen from Missouri, and an estimated 100 cavers, according to Karras. So, a lot of the people would cycle in and out for a day or two, but some stayed the whole time.
Yeah, I was going to say there was no doubt, I'm sure, banding together of the townspeople of Hannibal and the surrounding community. What was it like to witness that?
It was calamitous. It was, you have this pastoral town, and the South Side was kind of a little town within a town because the railroad often closed it off for long periods. So we had our own fire department, our own school, our own grocery stores and what have you. So part of the Highway 79 project was a viaduct that spanned the railroad. So, it opened up the South Side a little bit. But, it was a classic, the work ethic and the faith of the people were strong, and white picket fences. It was really an idyllic place to grow up. And all of a sudden, this neighborhood became scary, and parents are warning their kids to stay away from the grottos and the caves and the hills and the bluffs. And it was just kind of a dark time, and a lot of tears were shed. These families were beloved.
Yeah, I'm certain. At the time, was the outlook ever optimistic, or did most kind of from the get-go fear the worst?
Well, there was optimism initially. A lot of people just thought the boys had, run off on a lark and would be back when dark hit, but that wasn't the case. And so once you started putting the pieces together and identifying their locations, where they were and when, and it all kind of pointed to the road cut, and that was a really dismal thing to look at, because when the cavers arrived on the scene, they went into those road cut passages, and this was all preceded by a couple of weeks of dynamiting to just move millions of tons of rock and earth to sculpt this highway through this massive hill. So when they got down in these road cut passages, it was just fractured geology with all these fine cracks. And one caver said it looked like it was just like a puzzle, just held together by its own pressure. And if you removed one little piece, the whole thing would come down.
Wow.
So they were pretty depressed when they saw the terrible conditions existing in the road cut caves. And Murphy's Cave was a little different. The passages were smaller. Murphy's had been identified in 1872 by a fellow who was digging for fire clay and happened to dig into the cave. And interestingly enough, in 1873, 5 kids went into Murphy's Cave and got lost, and it was a calamitous moment then, too, and a group of men fired up their lanterns, and holding their lanterns ahead of them in these passages, finally, fortunately, found the boys, and again, 5 boys, and were able to rescue them. So, and then I fast forward, I found another incident where boys were lost in the cave, and this has never been reported, but in June of 1961, 4 boys, 2 of them brothers, the Owen brothers, went in, discovered Murphy's Cave, went in about 10 in the morning, got horribly lost about 700 or 800 feet into this bluff, and ran out of their string that they had used to track their way back. Their flashlights were dimming, and they were in big trouble. The youngest of the boys was 15, and he decided to stay put and just sit in a cave passage and wait for the others to return. Well, he sat in the dark for 3 hours, and I mean, this is cave darkness. Absolute, complete,
pitch black
blackness. You can't even tell if your eyes are opened or closed. That's how dark a cave can be. It's always midnight. So finally, the other 3 find their way back, and they're just gleeful that they've reconnected. And the other 3 says to the youngest Owen boy, "Well, did you find the way out?" And he says, "No, I've been waiting for you guys." Well, they said they did a lot of praying, and they carefully followed the scuffed clay floor where their sneakers had made marks earlier. And just as their lights were dimming, they finally found the string and were able to get out about 7 p.m. at night.
Wow.
So they were in there 9 hours lost most of that time. No food, no water, nothing. Hadn't told anyone they were going in there. And what's interesting is to this day, Ron Owen is now in his late 60s, and he still has to sleep with a nightlight. He says it was that traumatic.
Wow. Unreal. So all these years later, you've written Lost Boys of Hannibal. What was it like for you, not only as a writer, but as somebody who was there when it all happened, when it all unfolded, to go back to that, to revisit that time, not only in your life, but obviously a lot of people's lives?
Yeah, well, professionally, I've always been a writer. I was a journalist for about 20 years, and then I became a writer and communications consultant, which I still do. And this is my first book, and believe me, there are simpler books that could have been written because this was a doozy. In terms of research, going back over 50 years and finding these cavers and hoping they had good memories. And I had Karras's after-action report, which was helpful in terms of framing the narrative. And I have the newspaper clippings from the St. Louis and the Hannibal Quincy papers, so in Kansas City. So that helped me establish the timeline, what was happening when and where. And it was just kind of a puzzle that I built, and it was interesting. I started working on it, probably 15 years ago.
Wow.
But just by virtue of, my professional work and then juggling family, and we had 2 little girls that were growing, and I just couldn't devote that much time to it. And it really is a project that demanded full immersion. So last January, I just decided to, I've got to do this. I've got to get it done. It's the 50th year. So I took January to June and wrote it and finished it and found a publisher over the summer, and it's out now. So
outstanding. Tell me about some of the people that you spoke to when you were writing the book. I mean, what were some of the most interesting things that you learned that you didn't initially know about, when this was all actually happening?
Well, I think the biggest benefit of this book is going to be seeing this event from the perspective of the actual cavers, because we heard very little of the detail of the underground search during the news coverage 50 years ago. It was all very general. It was newspaper reporters, and they didn't want to get too technical for a lay audience, so it was kind of, a lot of Tom Sawyer and Mark Twain woven into their narratives. And so I think the big benefit is that people are actually going to experience going underground and looking at these caves through the eyes of the cavers themselves and seeing the formidable challenges that were posed by these maze caves. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier that Missouri is called the cave state, with 7,300 caves and another hundreds being found every year. And the geology of northeast Missouri is really distinctive because it has a layer of fine-grained Louisiana limestone, about 60 feet thick in places.
Wow.
And within this geological stratum are networks of intricate crisscrossed maze cave passages, which both of these search locations represented maze caves. And these were created by the waters of an ancient sea, kind of percolating through the cracks in this limestone over a span of millions of years. And, you know, the other maze caves that people have heard about are Mark Twain Cave and Cameron Cave. Those are both a mile south of the road cut location. So all of these maze caves are somewhat unique in caving, and they're all in a 1 mile by 3 mile area just south of Hannibal. So it's really pretty extraordinary.
Wow. It's a fascinating tale, you know, because so many people since then have been in those caves. There's still no further answers, really. So in present day, I mean, should we have a better understanding of what became of these boys, where they ended up, that kind of thing? Do we know that?
Well, there were rumors. John Wayne Gacy has always been introduced into the narrative on this because,
really,
you know, he, for people not familiar with him, he was a Chicago man who killed 33 young boys and threw some in a river in the Chicago area, and others were buried under his house. And it was a big story in the 1970s. Well, Cook County Sheriff's authorities they're still working the Gacy case because a lot of those remains remained unidentified for many years. And so they have worked hard at taking DNA from the survivors of those who have gone missing. And they've been able, over time, to bring some closure in a lot of these cases. So right now, they only have 6 sets of remains that remain unidentified. Now, the interesting thing is that Gacy, and one of the big rumors around the Hannibal search was that Gacy was part of the road construction crew. That's not true. In 66 and 67, he was in Waterloo, Iowa. He just married, and he and his wife were having children, and he was managing 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants that his father-in-law owned. And he was trying to do the best, but John Wayne Gacy had a dark part of his soul from a tough childhood and some beatings administered by his father. And we don't really have a full understanding of that. But once he was in Waterloo, that dark side emerged, and he started, inviting young boys into his basement for fellowship, and would serve alcohol and try to make sexual advances. And he eventually got nailed on a charge for that, and spent some time in prison. And after he got out of jail, his wife and their 2 children had left and never saw him again. But he moved to Chicago and lived with his mother and got involved in local politics, and that's really when the killing spree emerged. But police have identified he was meticulous at keeping records. So they have placed him in the early part of 67, possibly in Ladonia, Missouri, which is 40 miles from Hannibal. Now, what's interesting is that during the search, there was a so-called mystery man who would stand high on the road cut overlooking the road construction and the search activity. And a couple of times somebody would go up and ask him what he was doing, and he said, "Oh, I'm just watching the activity here." And shortly after the boys went missing, the mystery man vanished. They didn't see him again. So there was so much to do underground that they really didn't spend a lot of time tracing that trail, you know. He was gone, and that was the end of it. But police had no evidence ever of any foul play. If this happened today, one of the first places our minds would go would be foul play, right?
Sure,
they were abducted. But that wasn't the case back then, and Craig Dowell and Joel were pretty savvy, lean kids who could handle themselves. And I think it would be hard to get all 3 of them in a vehicle or something.
So do we know what the most likely scenario is that has happened here, or is that still, very much that unsolved mystery?
It's still an unsolved mystery, but when you read the book, you'll kind of figure out what the most likely scenario is, and that is involving the condition of the road cut caves. In the outer passages, the ceilings were red clay, which means that the shale lining had collapsed, and there was still a lot of dynamiting going on, and sometimes the dynamite would, the bulk of the force would go up into the air instead of exploding the geology. And but what would happen, they call them dynamite pockets, most of the force just goes up into the air, but there's still a compromise to the geology that, could collapse if it just was hit with a shovel or something. So a lot of the better cavers thought the boys probably got back into those passages. They had a shovel and could have been digging at the ceiling or whatever and just brought the whole thing down. And because it's such a complex cave with so much breakdown already in the passages, from ceiling collapses and the dynamiting and everything, that they were just never able to find them. One caver put it really well. He says, you can miss them by a mile or maybe inches. And that's really the way it was, that if a passage was closed, you didn't know if it had happened yesterday or a million years ago.
Wow.
And there were so many of them because the condition of the cave was so poor that it would have been physically impossible to dig them all out in time to get the boys out of there alive. So it was a terrible calamity.
Yeah, certainly. Well, early reviews of this book have got to be very flattering for you to read. I've read reviews that say the book is impossible to put down, that you, and I've noticed this just from speaking, you tell the story from many facets incredibly well, and that you capture all these emotions experienced during the time and even to present day. So how does it feel for your first book to be garnering such positive praise so early?
Well, it's a real blessing because first and foremost, I wanted to do a book that honored the whole process. I wanted to honor the boys, their families, and especially I wanted to do a book that would be respected by the cavers. And so it heartens me to read those 5-star reviews on Amazon, one of which was written by one of the cavers who was there the whole month.
Oh, wow.
So that feels good. And again, my hope is that this will help people to more fully understand this mystery, and in that regard, maybe help put a little more closure on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Some are saying that it's a tough read, but in a good way. Was it a tough story to tell?
It was. It required me to immerse myself back in 1967 with all these news clippings and interview transcripts before me, and bouncing in and out as a 13-year-old and then as a 63-year-old, and it was really an interesting kind of time travel, so to speak. But
sure.
It worked very well, immersing myself in it. I was able to get it done pretty expeditiously in terms of a book project.
Well, I can't wait to read the book. If others want to beat me to the punch, as they often do, where can they find Lost Boys of Hannibal?
Well, it's on Amazon right now, both softcover and Kindle. And it'll be, the bookstores in the Hannibal Quincy area have them on order, so it should be stocked pretty quickly. Then I'll be in Quincy for a book signing January 6th from 1 to 4 at Quincy Books at the Quincy Mall. And then on March 10, I'll be in Hannibal at the Mark Twain Museum, and there will be other signings, too, on my Facebook page. I'll make those announcements.
All right, fantastic. Well, if folks want to follow you online via that social media or website, where can they go to do that? Sure.
On Facebook, the page is author John Wingate, is all one word. And then on Twitter, it's @Wingate_author. And I'm very good about posting to social media, so in the upcoming days and weeks, I'll be posting excerpts and my personal thoughts as I wrote the book on some of my thinking and some of my experiences as a child witnessing this.
All right. The book is Lost Boys of Hannibal. The author is John Wingate. There's a lot of time that could be spent talking to you about this, and I hope we can catch up and talk some more about it down the line. But I appreciate your time today. It's been very fantastic to have you. Thank you so much.
Beau, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
You're listening to the Beaucephus Broadcast.
Hey guys, it's me, Mark James from Poop Culture. I don't have long, but I'm contacting you from the future. I can't go into details yet, but you need to subscribe to all the shows on the PCEU. It is imperative. In the future, they're huge. You have the Beaucephus Broadcast, the Mockers, Hysteria 51, the Video Rangers, Poop Culture, the Bro-Rons Podcast, Be Kind and Rewind, the Vantucky Fried Podcast, and Just in Time Podcast. If you can find a computer terminal, go to www.poopculture.com. You can listen to all the shows right from there. I can't say much. If you're listening to this and you're part of the resistance, code word Moist Crevice. Mark James, over and peace out.
We now return to the Beaucephus Broadcast.
I believe that is going to do it for episode 48 of the Beaucephus Broadcast. My big thanks once again to John Wingate. Great to finally get him on the program. What a fascinating chat about a story that I can't wait to read more about. I'm really looking forward to getting that book. You can buy the book as well. It's called Lost Boys of Hannibal. It's available on Amazon right now. While you're perusing the World Wide Web, don't forget, leave some feedback on the show wherever you're listening, whether it's iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spreaker, Stitcher, any of those outlets, and many more. Drop some feedback. It helps the show grow, and that feedback is greatly appreciated. Follow along on the internet as well, while you still can, at facebook.com/Beaucephus Broadcast. Give us a like over there. Also, while you're at it, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at BeauBcraft, and you can always email BeaucephusBroadcast@gmail.com. Once again, thank you to our sponsor this week, Vault. Enjoy 2 free months on me when you visit vault.io/BEAU. That's vault.io/Beau. You can begin effortlessly managing all of your passwords. You get more information by visiting vault.io/Beau. And just so you know, every download that comes from that URL helps prevent me from having to spin the PCEU wheel of punishment. Trust me, you don't want to make me look like more of a fool than I already am. So download it now. You do realize that this next episode is going to drop on Christmas, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. I'll have a little Christmas-centric show for you dropping on that day as well. And I'd like to hear from you. Feel free to share your favorite Christmas memories with me for inclusion in that show. You can record them on your phone's voice recorder and email them to BeaucephusBroadcast@gmail.com or send them via Facebook message to the Beaucephus Broadcast Facebook page. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to share your stories in next week's show. So hop to it, friends. Otherwise, that is going to do it for episode 48 of the Beaucephus Broadcast. We'll catch you next time for episode 49, the Christmas special. We'll catch you then.
You've been listening to the Beaucephus Broadcast.
What you just heard was a podcast in the Poop Culture Extended Universe. For more great podcasts, make your way to www.poopculture.com.